Harriet Patience Dame. During the Civil War, New Hampshire regiments kept their state identity, even though they served in armies commanded by federally appointed generals. New Hampshire's 2nd Regiment served longer than any other New Hampshire regiment. When it went south in 1861, the 2nd New Hampshire was accompanied by a 37-year-old woman, Harriet P. Dame, who lived from 1815 to 1900. She was styled a hospital matron, but she stayed with the frontline troops, tending the needs of wounded soldiers under fire. She was taken prisoner twice and once led wounded men to safety on a nighttime march. Although serving in a number of capacities during the war, she always loved the 2nd New Hampshire, donating the money for the regimental cottage at the Weirs in Laconia in 1886. The New Hampshire National Guard. After the Civil War, the New Hampshire militia had to be reconstructed. The first 2 units of infantry were joined by a 3rd when the New Hampshire National Guard was formed in the 1878 legislative session. Much of the militia, or National Guard, was mustered for the Spanish-American War in 1898. After the reorganization of the New Hampshire National Guard in 1907, the 1st New Hampshire Infantry was sent to the Mexican border in search of Pancho Villa. The New Hampshire National Guard was serving both the needs of the state and of the nation. The First World War. The war to end all wars was the phrase that was heard worldwide by everyone. Roughly 20,000 New Hampshire men and women served. 2 New Hampshire men serving in France in 1918 brought honor to our state for their heroism and bravery. Private George Dilboy of Keene was posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, our nation's highest award for valor. Private Dilboy eliminated a German machine gun emplacement that had his unit under scathing fire. He died of mortal wounds while saving his unit from certain death. Captain Robert Blood was a medical doctor and field surgeon serving in France. His acts of valor were recognized because of his courage in treating wounded soldiers on the battlefield away from his protected aid station. Captain Blood was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest award for valor. Dr. Blood was discharged and returned to his medical practice in New Hampshire. He was elected to the office of governor and served from 1941 to 1945. World War II. Almost 60,000 New Hampshire men and women joined the armed forces during World War II, roughly 1 out of every 8 residents of the state. The state's 2 National Guard units saw distinguished service in both the Pacific and European theaters. New Hampshire citizens also joined this total war, whether by watching for enemy aircraft, collecting scrap metal, buying war bonds, or simply doing without certain foods and consumer goods. No one symbolized the American spirit of World War II better than the men who raised the American flag on Mount Suribachi on the Japanese island of Iwo Jima on February 23, 1945. Up until 2019, it was believed that one of those men was from Manchester, Marine Corporal Rene Gagnon. However, after an extensive investigation by the U.S. Marine Corps and confirmed by the FBI's Digital Evidence Laboratory, it was announced in 2019 that Rene Gagnon was not one of the men who raised the flag on Mount Suribachi. However, it was confirmed that Mr. Gagnon did carry the 2nd flag up the steep cliff of Suribachi to be mounted on the 2nd pole and erected by 4 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman. The Air National Guard. The Army Air Corps began to deactivate units and retire planes and pilots after World War II, as tension associated with the Cold War convinced political and military leaders that a modern Air Force was needed, one that included a National Guard. By October 1946, a fighter squadron was assigned to the Adjutant General of New Hampshire and designated the New Hampshire Air National Guard. The unit was stationed at Grenier Field, south of Manchester. By 1960, the New Hampshire Air National Guard had been converted to a military transport group. The group moved to Pease Air Force Base by 1966, and in 1975 was flying KC-135 Stratotankers to refuel aircraft in flight. The 157th Air Refueling Wing has been recognized as the best in the Air National Guard. Korea. American Cold War strategy called for the United States to contain the spread of communism. In the summer of 1950, when troops from communist North Korea invaded and overran much of non-communist South Korea, the strategy was tested. United States troops, supported by the United Nations, repelled the North Korean assault, driving the enemy up the length of the Korean peninsula. At which point, Chinese troops crossed the Yalu River, driving the outnumbered American and United Nations forces back into South Korea. Battle lines eventually stabilized near the 38th parallel, the original line separating North and South Korea. At least 8,000 New Hampshire soldiers served in Korea between 1950 and 1953.